you are the movie-related discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am The Wiz! And today was supposed to be a review with Kim Shackman reviewing the film Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, starring Chris Pine, Michele Rodriguez, and Justice Smith, directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. Unfortunately, Kim is a little under the weather. She's not going to be able to record today, so I'm going to do a solo review of this movie. I guess what I will start with in this review is how familiar I am with Dungeons & Dragons. Well, with the actual tabletop game, not really. I played it once, and I get why people love Dungeons & Dragons and get into it. I just couldn't get into it, except for the creation part and creating a story and everything out of what you're doing. That, I was like, that's cool. It's the game part with the rolling of the dice and the save throws and all that where I was like, ooh, that's a little much. I'm kind of, that's really not for me. But I will say, though, I have played a lot of the D&D games on the PC, namely Icewind Dale 1 and 2. I've played a little bit of Neverwinter Nights back in the day. And I liked those games. I thought they were cool. I remember I played a lot of Icewind Dale, but I was so bad at it that I couldn't get out of, I think, like the second area. This was when I was like, I think 18 or 19. I really wasn't paying attention too much. I should try that again. I should try playing that game again. But what really caught my attention with those games is the ability to create your characters, give them a backstory, and just create them the way you want. And I was like, that's awesome. That is really cool, and that's what really got me interested in these types of games. And then, of course, I played games like Dark Alliance 2. D&D, when it comes to video games, is really integral to RPGs, essentially. A lot of the games, like even, let's say back in the day with Dragon Quest, I think I read this before, that Dragon Quest got its inspiration from D&D, basically. And a lot of the systems that are used in these RPGs are really just a send-up of what D&D does. It's clear to see that D&D is an inspiration to a lot of different video games, which is why I think it fit under this category, even though it technically is not a video game movie. And honestly, I also made sure that I had a movie that maybe Kim would enjoy, because I know the rest of them were kind of terrible. So I felt a little bad, so I gave her that out. Alright, so let's get into the review of Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. I actually came into this film this week thinking this would probably be the film I liked the most of the three films that I saw for the week. The three films are this one, the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and Pokemon Detective Pikachu. I was thinking that probably the Pikachu movie was the one I was going to like the least. And I'm actually kind of surprised that at the end of this, the Pikachu movie is the one I liked the most. I thought the Pikachu movie was really good. And I'm also surprised to say that this is the one I like the least. This movie is entertaining. I did end up enjoying my time, but there are some issues I have with it. One of them, chiefly, is the movie's too damn long. I think it was just way too long for the type of movie it was. On top of that, the action isn't that good. I think the action looks a little messy. It's not as exciting or as fluid as I would expect from a film like this. It really felt like a step back from like movies like Lord of the Rings or other fantasy films that does these type of combat pretty well. So let me get into specifics in the story. I'm not going to do spoilers of this movie. If you want to just go to the final thoughts, you can go right ahead. I'll do minor spoilers. Probably won't do any, but let's get into performances. I think the performances are good in a comedic sense. I think Chris Pine is good as the lead. I also like Rege-Jean Page. I thought he was pretty good. I actually really like Justice Smith. The four actors who played the main heroes I thought were pretty good, except for Michele Rodriguez. The thing I will say about Michele Rodriguez's performance, either she did not have a good director to really guide her as to how to make that character work, or she might have just been wrong for that type of role. Now, I am not saying that she was wrong for the role as an intimidating presence. She definitely was. She played the physical part of it well. But the problem is with this movie, that this movie is essentially a comedy first and then an action movie second. And the way they portray her character is that she is not a bright person. Well, no one is a bright person in this movie, clearly. But they try and play her character for laughs, but she does it a little too deadpan. The thing I was thinking of throughout this film is I think they want to make her the Kronk of this movie, which is the intimidating presence who also is very lovable, but also strangely hilarious. Kronk is the character that I think is the standout from The Emperor's New Groove. I think that's where they were going for in this one. Oh, well, there's a number of problems with this. The first problem is every character is a comedy character in this movie. Comparing her to, let's say, the comedic timing of Chris Pine, or even like Justice Smith in this movie, she doesn't really compare very well. Now, did I want her to be dry as a board? No, I didn't want her to do that. But if she was the more serious and intimidating person, and not one used for like comedic value, I think it would have worked a lot better in this. I think she actually can pull that off very well. She pulls it off pretty well in other movies that she's done. Like, she can do that role. The comedic stuff, I think, fell very flat in this movie. So I think with her specifically, I'm not blaming her. I don't think this is a lack of her ability to put in a good performance. I don't think that's what it is. I think they wrote the character wrong for her. They really should have looked at what she does best and fashioned it from there. Instead, they kind of shoehorned her into this character that I think just didn't work for her in this one. So I think that performance was not great. The villain of the movie, which is Hugh Grant, I thought he was pretty good in that smarmy Hugh Grant way that he has. The performances comedically, I think, are actually pretty good in this movie. It's when the action starts coming in is where I kind of lost the interest. I think the action is where the film kind of falls apart. I think the only actor in this movie that actually does the action well is Michele Rodriguez. The rest of them, not great. Rege-Jean Page is actually not bad in the action scene that he had, but even that seemed a little too choreographed, a little too by the numbers. I think that was not his fault. I think he has a good presence in them where he can do that and be believable. But I think the decisions they made in the action just did not fit well. I think the best performance of the film is Justice Smith. It was kind of surprising because I just got done with watching Pokemon Detective Pikachu, and as decent as the performance as that was, it was not that deep of a performance. This isn't deep either, but he shows a lot of charisma in the character that he has, which is Simon, who is, I guess, an inept sorcerer. He's actually pretty good in this movie. I actually liked him the most out of anybody in this movie. So let's get into writing. I think the comedy works. I think the comedy is what saves this film for me. I think it's what makes the film entertaining and why I ended up enjoying. Like, the comedy, I think, is like really well done. And I like the fact that the film is keenly aware of what it's doing. Throughout like the first half of the movie, I kept saying to myself, oh my God, are they purposely turning these people into morons? Because they are all stupid in like really profound ways. And then in a scene in the movie, which I will not spoil, they literally confirm it. And I'm like, oh, okay. They know what they're doing. All right, great. After I like bought into that, I was like, okay, I'm cool with it now. Like the movie knows what it's doing. Like, and the comedy parts landed real well. So I was like, okay, cool. So I'm fine with that. Like I said during the performance part, the action and drama, I think, is where the film falls apart for me. I don't think it's that good. I think the film itself is pretty standard in that sense. But the only reason why it's entertaining is because of the comedy parts. The comedy parts is what makes the film watchable. Whereas the drama parts, I think, are not great. I think the thing between Chris Pine's character and his daughter, it just didn't work for me. I just thought it wasn't that well realized. It's all standard stuff, which, to be fair, I think is actually kind of part and parcel to Dungeons and Dragons. I think in the writing sense, I think the comedy lands, the rest of it doesn't, but the comedy is good enough to make the film at least be enjoyable. Direction, it's okay. It's like standard fantasy direction, which on the one hand is fine for this type of movie, but on the other hand, you have this property that has so much popularity, and I think part of its popularity is how unique it can be. I just think they should have dove more into that aspect, where things can happen that you're not necessarily anticipating, and I think that could have worked very well in this movie's favor, but they went really safe in this movie, which I think was a bad move. It wouldn't hurt to surprise in a lot of the sense of this movie, but they just didn't. They just wanted to make it a standard movie that's entertaining, which is fine. That's fine, but it doesn't really hit the way I would like it to in this movie. I think this could have been a very unique type of movie that added with the comedy and with the drama and everything. Like, I think that could have really worked, but they just didn't go that route. They just went a standard fantasy movie, which, again, fine. It's entertaining as it is with that, with the comedic aspects, but I was expecting more, and as such, the direction is pretty standard for a fantasy movie. You have large vistas, you have battles that are I guess not close, but could have used a better choreography. I think the comedic timing is the best part of this movie, really, and the rest of it is kind of ho-hum. I think that just seeps right into the direction of the film. The film looks good. The film looks actually pretty decent. I don't know. I guess I was expecting a lot more than I got out of this. Final thoughts on Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. It's an okay film. I think its biggest strength is its comedy. I think it was a funny movie, and in that way it kept me entertained, and it was fun in that aspect. But the fantasy elements, I think, are the weakest part of this movie. The action, the sorcery, the in-depth stuff like that makes those kind of worlds interesting. That is where I think the film kind of falls apart, and it isn't as good as it should be, and which is what I find very disappointing about it. I think Justice Smith has got the best performance of the movie. I think the worst, but I will reiterate again, I think the worst, but it isn't her fault, is Michele Rodriguez. I think she was either miscast, or they didn't write the part effectively enough for her, or they didn't direct her in the right way, because she's capable of doing something like this. She's capable of being funny and being intimidating, but the intimidating part, she got down pat. The funny part is where I think it fell flat for me. I'm going to give this 2.5 stars out of 5. Again, I was entertained. I had a good time. I just think it was too long, and I think the action could have been a lot better, and I think the drama also could have been improved. I'm largely disappointed by this movie, but on the other hand, I can't say it's a bad movie. It's entertaining. It's a fun movie to kill almost 2.5 hours. So if you are interested in this movie, I would say give it a shot. It's fun. It's a fun movie. But it's something that I was hoping for much more than that, especially with the cast that it had. And it just didn't turn out that way. So 2.5 stars from me on Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Well, I talked to Kim before this, and she decided what she wanted to watch for next week's film. We're doing all Westerns next month. We did it completely by accident, but we're doing it. So Kim has chose for next Saturday to review the Coen Brothers remake of True Grit, starring Jeff Bridges, Matt Damon, Haley Steinfeld, and Josh Brolin, directed by the Coen Brothers. I saw this movie a while back. I love this movie. I particularly love Haley Steinfeld in this movie, so I'm going to look forward to watching this again. Hopefully Kim agrees with me. She's been agreeing with me, so maybe that's what's going to happen, but we will see what happens with that review. So tune in next week. On Tuesday, me and Zero are going to review Tampopo. Thursday, I'm going to review The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And Saturday, me and Kim are going to review True Grit. And until then, I am The Wiz, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.